Hey guys, and welcome to the 64th episode of EduAllStars. My name is Todd Nesloni, and you can find me on Twitter at TechNinjaTodd. My co-host this evening is...
And my name is Chris Kessler. You can find me on Twitter at IamKessler. We just want to thank everyone for joining us tonight. We have a great guest, and just want to let you know that you can leave reviews on iTunes. It truly helps out with our ratings and rankings. You can comment on the blog post. We've got all the show notes that we'll keep. So any links that we talk about tonight, you can go to the specific episode on our eduallstars.com and check out the show notes there and link you from there.
And we would like to recognize the EduAllStars podcast for this episode, which is Miami Device. Miami Device is going to be an incredible two-day conference happening November 6th and 7th in sunny South Florida. It is one that you will not want to miss. The keynote, the featured speakers, they're unlike any event which you'll have to see it to believe it. Definitely go to miamidevice.org and check it out to get all the details of the event. I will be one of the presenters there, so hopefully I'll get to see you there as well.
And as you listen to this week's episode, we encourage you to use the hashtag EduAllStars as you tweet and live tweet. Todd's going to be live tweeting as well. It's always fun to go back and especially for our guests to go back and just kind of follow the tweets that happen during the show, and you can connect with them that way.
I am really excited to have this week's guest on. This week's guest is Gary Aboud. He is the 2014 Michigan Teacher of the Year and is currently an instructional coach with the Grosse Pointe Schools. Thank you so much, Gary, for coming on with us tonight.
Absolutely. Thanks so much for having me, guys. Really appreciate having me on tonight.
Well, Gary, where we always like to start with our guests is just hearing a little bit about their background and how you got into education.
Absolutely. So my story all kind of begins in a different place than education. Starts out with me actually wanting to be a physician. Since I was a little kid, I had an eye disease that caused me to have corrective surgery. I had 2 cornea transplants when I was younger, and it really got me interested in the medical field, and I always wanted to give back in the way that my eyes had been my vision restored. So I actually went on a career track to be a physician, worked in medical research after doing the pre-med program at a university in Detroit, and then kind of found my calling wasn't really medicine after all. Found that it was science education and went into a graduate program, became a teacher, and the rest brings me here today.
And so are you still in the classroom today then?
Currently I'm out of the classroom operating on a special assignment, so I work at the district office doing instructional coaching.
That's correct. So we'll get into that.
What did you teach?
I'm sorry, go right ahead.
Oh, sorry, what did you teach?
So I was a physics and chemistry teacher for high school, so 11th and 12th grade mostly.
It's funny. I was just telling Todd before you jumped on the call. I'm like, man, we need to get a secondary high school like science teacher or some kind of teacher like that. I wasn't even aware that that's what you taught.
Oh my gosh! Yeah.
No, that's awesome. Perfect. All right, because I'm an 8th grade science teacher, so okay. My kids feed to you, right? So.
That's right. Eventually, they connect.
Awesome. So when you were, let's talk about the science classroom for a little bit. Tell me, so why science? Why not math? Why not reading? Those kinds of things.
So it really connects back to my first passion, which was medicine, and the kind of career trajectory that I was on since a young age to go into medicine really got me interested in science. I did a lot of kind of independent research to learn about this eye condition that I had known as keratoconus and kind of the surgery that I had to have to correct my vision and restore my sight. So I got fascinated by science from a real young age and absolutely loved and ate up everything that was science. So it just made a perfect fit for me when I learned that my calling was teaching, for me to put that together with science and go into science teaching.
Did you have a science teacher maybe in middle school, or maybe your physics teacher or chemistry teacher in high school that you kind of that stood out? And if they did, what specifically did they do in science that made you kind of gravitate towards that?
So this is a great question, actually, and it'll kind of connect a little bit later with some of the other things we might talk about. But one of my physics teachers in my career was a high school physics teacher I had in 12th grade named Don Pata, and he's now a colleague of mine in the Grosse Pointe school system.
Oh, wow.
He just really brought learning to life, and he taught in a way that was different than any other science teacher and really any other teacher that I ever had. And he was using this constructivist method where he would give us a task or a problem to solve or a challenge in class, and we would do this experiment or try to figure out this problem, and then afterwards, through a kind of debrief, and we did all these different, what I now call visible thinking routines, we would figure out what it was that was going on in the situation. And it was kind of this reverse situation to what I was used to, which was the teacher just tells you what it's supposed to be, and then you do an experiment to confirm that that's actually true. And when it was reversed for me, it really helped things to sink in, and it just brought learning to life for me. And I always remembered that, and it really has inspired how I now teach all of my students.
Awesome. So let's jump right into talking about that you won a major award this year. You actually were recognized as the Michigan Teacher of the Year. Can you kind of tell us a little bit about that? And congratulations, by the way, too. That's an amazing honor, I'm sure.
Thank you very much. Yeah, it's been a tremendous honor, and I'm actually kind of wrapping up my year now as Michigan Teacher of the Year. And the award is actually a recognition from the State Department of Education, and any teacher in the K-12 school system around Michigan can be nominated. I found out that I was nominated by a science teacher colleague of mine who I used to work with about 5 or 6 years ago. And I guess I left a really good impression on that person, and they nominated me, so I was sent an application and an invitation to apply for this prestigious award by the state superintendent. So I completed the application with hundreds of other teachers from around the state, and then the applications are reviewed locally, regionally, and then at the state level before they select 4 state finalists to bring into the state capitol to do an interview. So I went in for about an hour-long interview with a panel from the Department of Ed, and then I found out last May that I was selected as the 2014 Michigan Teacher of the Year.
Awesome. That's crazy. Now, as part of that, you got to travel to the White House to see who was going to be selected as the National Teacher of the Year. What was that like, getting to meet the president and see all the other teachers from all over the country who represented their states?
So this was actually one of the highlights of my career, and there have been so many different great things that have happened for me professionally during this experience as Michigan Teacher of the Year. But one of the highlights is being part of a national program that's put on by the Council of Chief State School Officers, and it's known as the National Teacher of the Year program. And what it does is it brings together all of the state teachers of the year for about 6 weeks throughout the calendar year, for about a week at a time, to different national conferences. So I got to meet all the other state teachers of the year back in January. We went to a conference out west. And then we got together in Washington, D.C. in April, where they revealed who the National Teacher of the Year was, who was selected for that. His name is Sean McComb. He's from Maryland. And so I got to know all of these teachers back early in the year, and it was just so impressive to see the great things happening, not just in your local area, not just in your state, but around the country. And from every corner of the nation, you heard of great things happening in third grade classrooms, special education classrooms, vocational classrooms. And so then to be able to go to Washington with these folks and be able to really sink into professional development, grow in that community, and to be able to meet the president together and celebrate our National Teacher of the Year was just one of those memories that I'll never forget. It was just a great experience.
So you get a year sabbatical. Is that what it is? And to work on something that you believe in, or what does that look like?
So it actually turns out to be up to the individual school district to decide what your assignment will be during your year of recognition.
Okay.
My district decided to use me in a non-classroom capacity last year, and what they chose to do was to have me work part-time with the district office, doing instructional coaching and advising the curriculum and technology departments. And that allowed me to work part-time with my local district, as well as to work part-time through the State Department of Ed on state-level projects, as well as some national travel.
Cool.
Yeah, but it's not necessarily the case that each teacher will be pulled from their classroom. Some state teachers of the year stay teaching, and then they have a dedicated substitute who will work with them in their classes when they need to leave.
Yeah, I may be wrong on this, but I believe that the Texas Teacher of the Year, I was the Teacher of the Year in my district one year, and one of the things that the questions on there was, what would you do if you got a year sabbatical to work on, something that would to help kids in Texas, essentially. So you kind of chose a platform at that point on your application, and I thought that was pretty cool that you actually got to choose something that you wanted to work with. So I didn't realize it was different from state to state, and that's pretty cool too.
Yeah, it is, and congratulations to you. And
I appreciate that. Yeah.
Texas, there's a lot of teachers in Texas.
That was like a humble brag, I think. I didn't mean to throw that in there, but
much deserved. But
but that context is important.
So Gary, now that you are currently outside of the classroom and more of a role of helping other teachers, what is something that you've noticed that you really miss from being in the classroom?
So I would have to say those individual and personal relationships that you develop with a classroom of kids when you work with them day in and day out, while I do get to work shoulder to shoulder with classes now, and I do still get to interact with kids when I go in and co-teach lessons, you don't get to develop that same rapport that you would if you saw kids every day, day in and day out. So I really have to say that I miss, especially at the high school level, being able to connect with those kids, being able to go see them play their sporting events on the evenings, go see them at different extracurricular activities, and really get to be part of that school culture in a different way with the kids is something that I haven't really been able to fill that void just yet.
Awesome.
I imagine that winning this award has kind of opened some doors for you to allow you to do some public speaking. Is that something you've always been comfortable with, or is this something you had to kind of learn to handle, or tell me what that looks like?
So I guess I would say it's a little bit of both. So I've had the opportunity this past year to present over 6 times at schools, districts, state level events, universities, conferences, and a variety of different things. But before then, I had the opportunity to be a public speaker every day as a classroom teacher. And I think we all kind of forget sometimes that we're giving a presentation 5, 6, 7 times each and every day. So we get really good at public speaking, but just by being classroom teachers. However, I would say that I had to do a lot of practice and a lot of my homework to kind of scale that up to the level of presenting at a conference in front of thousands of people, or to be able to speak in front of the State Board of Education, or to work with legislators. It was a very different type of presentation, but I was able to translate some of what I learned in the classroom as far as presenting went.
I always find it interesting when we're in like a professional development situation with maybe a faculty or a staff, and someone's like, "Oh, I don't like speaking in front of groups." It's like, man, that's what you do every single day.
No, but I will say, it took me a while to be comfortable speaking in front of adults, because I can act a fool and I can really connect with kids, but when I get in front of people my own age or older, I'm like, oh no, now I'm gonna look ignorant. Because I teach 5th grade. It's not that hard to look smarter than a 5th grader, but it is harder to seem knowledgeable in a subject area when you're speaking in front of a bunch of adults who are like, why is that guy standing up there? What's he going to show me? What's going on? That was nerve-wracking for me when I started presenting.
Here, this just in, most teachers are probably like big 5th graders. So I'm a big 8th grader, I can tell you that.
And that was the advice that I was given that was the most impactful advice for me as presenting. They said, stop looking at the room as a room full of adults and look at it as a room full of kids that are just like the classroom that you have at your school, except that they're there to learn just like your kids are there to learn.
Yeah, definitely. So go ahead, Todd.
So Gary, when working with teachers, what's the biggest thing that you're typically asked to work with them on?
So I get really it kind of falls into 2 different areas. One is instructional strategies that are typically aligned to things like visible thinking, project-based learning, and then the other piece is technology. So I get a lot of requests for technology integration support, things like working with mobile devices and mobile learning, to working with apps, and a lot of Google Apps for Education training are kind of the heaviest areas of requests that I get and work with regularly.
What's your favorite to present on?
I would say project-based learning or science instruction are probably my 2 favorite. And I think it comes back to that 12th grade science teacher that I had that I was talking about earlier, really inspired the way that I teach now. And I actually went and took graduate classes through Arizona State University to learn this method called the modeling method, which is that way of teaching science through a constructivist approach. And it really kind of goes hand in hand with project-based learning and all those different constructivist methods that are out there. So I really get into presenting on those topics, although the tech is a lot of fun too.
Yeah.
What kind of tech do your students have as 12th graders? Do you guys, even as like a district, do you guys have laptops in the room? Do they all have devices by that time? They all have smartphones?
So I would say there's kind of a variety. My classroom has always been a bring your own device classroom, and I would say the vast majority of students, probably 80%, based on the surveys that I took when I was most recently in the classroom, were smartphones. There was a small number of kids who would bring in a tablet, whether it was an iPad or an Android tablet, and I think I only ever had like 1 or 2 kids who would bring in a full-scale laptop. When we needed to do some heavy computing, we had a computer, like a desktop, at each of our lab stations, but for the most part, we were operating on mobile devices probably the majority of the time.
Cool. Just shifting gears a little bit, what's something you're maybe reading right now or maybe have read in the last year that you may want to recommend to someone else, or maybe you would give as a gift to someone else? You got any book recommendations?
Yeah, I do. So there's actually two. One that I've finished and one that I'm just kind of digging into recently. The one that I finished is Mindset by Dweck. And I would say this is one that really resonated with me as a teacher, not just as a science teacher, but in general. This idea of there are two types of mindsets out there, a fixed and a growth mindset. And if you've read any of Dweck's work, you kind of know the basic premise is that a fixed mindset is when you think about yourself as having a finite amount of potential, whether that be your smarts or whether that be your ability. But people they have found who have a growth mindset and realize that it's not that you have a fixed amount of potential you're born with, but that you can develop it through practice and hard work. Those folks end up tending to grow more in their ability simply by virtue of the fact that they have a mindset that believes there's growth. So I highly recommend Mindset by Dweck to any educator. And most recently, a buddy of mine, Joe Versalino, who's a music teacher in Detroit, Michigan, recommended this title, The 5 Dysfunctions of a Team. And it is one, I just opened it up the other day, it came in the mail. But this guy, Patrick Lencioni, has really got an interesting recipe for how teamwork happens and how it also falls apart. And I'll give you kind of the piece that's really hooking me in right now is he talks about trust. But he talks about it in a way that I've never heard it before. And he says, if you walked into a room where there was no conflict happening, would you think that people trusted each other in a team? And most people would say, yeah, it seems like you trust them. And he says, but if there's not conflict happening, it might mean that people don't trust each other to handle that conflict well or to handle it professionally. And so things like absence of disagreement, absence of discussion, or differences in opinion can actually be symptomatic of a lack of trust in an organization or a team. And this was something that's really kind of drawing me into this book right now. So
Okay.
5 Dysfunctions of a Team and Mindset, for sure.
And I'll put the links to both those books in the show notes there.
Excellent.
That's awesome. Yeah, and as a district admin, all the admin in my district, we are having to read Mindset by Dweck.
Okay.
And it has been incredibly eye-opening because, for me, I started reading the book thinking I had a growth mindset in all these areas. And as you read through it and work through it, you realize it's, I don't know, it was a very eye-opening book and helped me really see what it really takes to have a growth mindset and how important that is. I mean, how much a fixed mindset can ruin things that you're trying to do.
Absolutely, and it's been even more eye-opening for me now as a parent to be able to think about as my daughter's growing up and starting to do things, the way that I praise her for what she does and what she accomplishes. I'm finding myself kind of reverting back to that fixed mindset of like, oh, good job, or things that just kind of assume that she would have just done that just by the virtue of the fact that she's alive.
Right.
So starting to fine-tune myself a little bit in how I praise others, especially my own daughter.
Yeah. So, Gary, when you're having a really rough day and there's things that have just gone terribly wrong, what do you do to recenter yourself?
So I would say there are 2 things that I do, and one is kind of other people, so family and friends are really something that I try to focus inward a lot on, family and friends. And this is sort of something that over the past year I've learned this art of balancing, life balance. So I'd say I connect really heavily with family and friends, and I lean on them for support. My wife, who's a teacher of special education students, is someone who I go to for advice and counsel all the time. The other thing that I've really jumped into is exercise. And I've always been an active person, but I've found even more now when there's kind of challenging professional times or even personal times that exercise is really an outlet that helps me to kind of stay centered. I mean,
Is exercise something you did earlier on and kind of lost your way and got back to, or is it something newly found that you're getting into?
It was something that I didn't really get into until after college. I played tennis in high school, and I was active as far as racket sports went, but I wasn't really an active person most of my life. But after college, I kind of started to get along with and have different people in my circle of friends who were more active and running and cycling, and got into a lot more things that kind of opened my eyes to those opportunities.
What's one of the biggest things that you've kind of learned over the last year?
I have learned that it is incredibly rewarding and incredibly challenging to be an educator, and the times are reflective of that. And I'm not trying to make the biggest statement that I can right now, but as I sum it up, it's a challenging time to be an educator in any place in the country. It really is. And at the same time, there's so much opportunity out there in being a classroom teacher or an educator at any level that it's one of the best times. So I would say that I could sum up the biggest, that famous quote, it was the best of times, it was the worst of times. It's a challenge and an opportunity to be an educator right now, and I'm glad that I'm one at this time.
Awesome.
So Gary, what is some advice that your current self would give your brand new teacher self?
That's a good question. So my brand new teacher self did not have a good handle on realism. And what I mean by that is I came out of college like many other teacher candidates leave teacher education school, and they think that everything in the textbook is going to be prescriptive and it's going to tell you exactly what to do and how to do it, and all of the outcomes are going to work exactly as you expect them to. And I was perhaps a bit overinflated in my estimations of how how I would translate my theory into practice. And it took me a good year to realize that many of those things were correct, but they weren't as prescriptive as they were advertised to be. So I would definitely give myself kind of a caution to go slow to go fast, and not to expect things to work on the first try, and that it's okay to make mistakes and to expect that there's going to be speed bumps along the road.
Yeah, that's what first period's for, isn't it? All your mistakes, right?
That's right.
Yeah, poor first period.
Or first year teaching.
That's exactly right. Yeah, we've talked about this before, but it's like everyone, look back in your first year and like, oh my, you just shake your head and just, oh my gosh. But everyone goes through it. It's just, it's a natural cycle, and hopefully schools have a mix of veteran teachers and mentorships that can pick these teachers up that are just learning the craft, and programs that teachers can fall back on if they're having difficulties. But there's no way around it. I mean, you're going to encounter that. You're going to be treading water. I mean, and there's nothing really you can do to get around it.
Absolutely. And it's funny you mentioned the mentoring. I had a really great mentor during my first year of teaching, but the person who I was paired with for my mentor had 25 years on me experience. And it was great. There were all this wisdom and everything just coming my way all the time. But there was this big difference between our experience that made it tough for them to put themselves in my shoes. Mm-hmm. So while they could dish out wisdom left and right, they really couldn't empathize with me as a brand new teacher. And so it was tough sometimes to relate. And it wasn't until my second year teaching that I went and sought out mentors who were closer in their experience level to me, and went and found those second, third, and fourth, and fifth year teachers to say, hey, how do you do it? Can I come see your classroom? Or I'm struggling with this. And I kind of started to find that maybe peer mentoring, or at least a narrower experience gap of mentoring, could be a little bit more effective than our traditional, here's the most veteran teacher in your department, and here's the newbie, and talk to each other and it'll be fine.
Yeah, right. And then there's so many great conversations happening on Twitter that you can also find mentorship from. Like that NT chat is just phenomenal. Every time I, look up that hashtag, I see all kinds of great conversations happening there. So, you definitely have to find someone. Doing it on your own is really not an option. It's not a winning option for sure.
No, it certainly is not.
So, one interaction with a child or a parent that may stick with you for like maybe the rest of your life. Have you had one of those experiences?
I have, and I think we all have. One of the pieces of advice that a mentor, an unofficial mentor, gave me, whether it was warranted or asked for or not, they gave me this piece of advice, and it was, if you can make positive phone calls home in front of kids, it will make the light switch flip. And it doesn't matter what kind of things are happening. If you can use an opportunity to make a positive phone call home, it would be great. So I remember teaching 10th grade, 9th grade, and 10th grade biology one year. And I had a young lady who was a 9th grader, and we just weren't connecting in that academic way that was making it the most successful experience for learning that it could be. And I remember one day just saying, you know what, I'm going to lean on that advice. And I said, hey, after class, can you just stick around for a minute? We're going to make a quick phone call. Call home to talk about some things. And so I made a quick phone call home and, kind of just praised the great things that I saw that she was doing in class to her folks at home. And, she was so surprised because she wasn't expecting that to be the phone call home. The next day she comes in and she says, she tells me this story about how her dad had an accident, he was in a wheelchair, and her mom wasn't around. She lived with her grandparents, and they got this phone call, and that they were so impressed, and they had never gotten a positive phone call home, that they had a special dinner of her favorite carryout, and they made this big to-do about her, and it just totally shifted the gears of the entire rest of the working relationship we had that year, that I will never forget the power of a positive phone call home when the kid's right in front of that phone with you.
That's
I love
awesome.
that.
Yeah, I've heard obviously the positive calls home, but I've never heard of doing it right in front of the kid. How impactful that is, and that's awesome. I'll be doing that like this week.
Well, we did that at my school, and as an administrator, trying to do that as a different perspective. And it was funny because I wrote about this in our blog from our first week of school this year, is that we had one kid who typically does not make the right decisions and is known for that. And there was a very interesting situation that happened in class where he could have chosen to do what he typically does, which is run his mouth and punch the kid, but he chose to step back from it and to choose a different route to handle the situation. And so his teacher was like, go see Mr. Nasloni, go brag to him. And so we called his mom, and his mom didn't answer, but we left a voicemail telling her how great of a day he had and this awesome thing that he did or whatever. And it was so cool because he was leaving my office, and he said, you know what? He said, my mom is going to hug me really big tonight now because of that. And that was one of those moments that I was like, yes, that is now it's my goal to at least once a week find a kid that we can call home, just because of comments like that a kid makes just because you called home about something good, and that parent's not used to those phone calls.
That's right. Oh, yeah, I love that story. Just the fact that they could acknowledge that they're going to get hugged, like what a difference that's got to make.
Yeah.
And, they bring that with them, and then that becomes contagious. You'll have them in your corner forever.
Yep.
Yeah, absolutely.
So, Gary, one of the questions that we always like to end the conversation on is, what is something right now that you are really passionate about?
So right now I'm passionate about a sentence, and here's the sentence, and I'll explain it afterwards. The sentence is, we need to stop evaluating teachers, and we need to start evaluating teaching. And the reason I say this sentence is something I'm really passionate about is we see all over the country that teacher evaluation is becoming this nebulous and contentious thing. It's becoming systematic at the state level in some places, and it's becoming localized in others. And what we're seeing is that it's really putting people against each other. It's putting teachers in a position where they're not feeling supported, where they're feeling victimized, where they're feeling that it's punitive, and we're not actually getting at the heart of making teaching better so that we can make learning better and help ensure high levels of learning for all. And I really think that if we could just focus our conversation on a different word, if we could talk about the evaluation of teaching and not the evaluation of teachers, the people, that we would be focusing on a conversation that can help ensure that high levels of learning are happening for all teachers, all students, and improving our profession and elevating it from the classroom to the district to the state.
I love that.
So,
yeah, I love it, Gary.
I've been working really hard this year at the policy level and at the local level to kind of shift that conversation about how we talk about teacher evaluation to how we talk about teaching evaluation, because if we can get everybody focused off of the person, then it's no longer you're a highly effective person or you're an ineffective person, but rather it's this teaching that I'm seeing, that I'm observing, isn't working right now. And I think that we can objectively look at the teaching separately from the person. And it dials back to something we talk about with students, and that's if you can separate the action from the child and talk about the action, you could be much more effective in remedying the actions or making them even better.
Right.
That's awesome. Well, Gary, thanks so much for taking some time to spend 30 minutes with us this evening on a Sunday evening. I know you've got probably a busy week ahead, just like we do, and it's good to catch up with someone that we followed on Twitter, and it's just good to talk with you. How can listeners connect with you?
So listeners can connect with me. Probably the best way would be on Twitter. They can find me at Mr_Aboud, A-B-U-D. You can also check me out and find a way to contact me by email on my website, aboud.me. And I do have a blog on there as well as some resources for teachers, and I'll be continuing to update that this year. It's my Teacher of the Year website, and I'm looking to transform it into a more ongoing resource for others. But feel free to get in touch with me by email directly, gary@abud.me, and I look forward to connecting with you online.
Awesome. And ways you can connect with us, you can find us on, I finally did type in EduAllStars on Google, Todd, and we own the first 10 slots. So just type in EduAllStars and you can find a way to connect with us. Our main site is eduallstars.com. You can do eduallstars.com/podcast and see all 64 episodes, and it'll take you to the correct link. Also on iTunes, you can download the podcast app or the what's that other app that we use all the time that always retweets our stuff? Anyway, there's all kinds of podcast apps out there. Just type in EduAllStars and you'll be able to find the episodes there.
And we would like to invite everybody to join us next Sunday at 8 p.m. for our next guest. And also, don't forget to check out miamidevice.org, who is this week's sponsor. You can see the sessions, the speakers, and everything else that's been planned for what for sure is going to be the EdTech event of the year. So definitely go on and check out them. You can also check them out at Miami Device on Twitter. Thank you so much again, Gary. We had a blast talking with you, and we really appreciate you giving us some of your time.
Absolutely. Thanks so much for having me, guys. It was a great time, and good to see you face to face.
Yeah, thanks, Gary.